Hello everyone and welcome back to my studio. So today we are getting back to another mixed media collage piece, and I am using an 8" by 8" cradled wooden board. And this is actually a board, you may have noticed it was a little dark. I'm actually reclaiming this because I had a piece on there that I didn't like. So I thought what I would do would be to try to soak off the collage and scrape off the paint and see if I could reuse it. I didn't like the piece as it was, so I didn't feel like I was really going to be sacrificing anything if it didn't work. I just put some very hot water in my kitchen sink, like probably just about a ½ inch, and let just the surface soak so that it didn't warp it. And I scraped everything off that I could, sanded it down, re-gessoed it, and it was good to go. So just for your information, if you ever need to do that, it works. So I started by priming it with gesso, and then I laid down a coat of titanium white paint, and I went in with a little bit of Winsor & Newton pale pink. And I'm now going in with golden fluid acrylics, Mars black, and titanium white. So I want to keep the background of this fairly neutral, and this is a color combination that I like a lot, and I love the way these fluid acrylics work. They just kind of blend into each other and create these fun patterns if you spray some water on them and let them sit. And that's what I was looking for here, just something kind of neutral but a little bit patterned so that I can lay down some fun collage work on top of. And while this is drying, I'm going to go ahead and pull some gel prints that I'm going to use for this particular collage. So I've got my large 8 by 10 plate there, and I'm putting down some titanium white. This is going to be another floral. I really love doing these, and I have so many different ideas for floral pieces. So if you like that sort of thing, stick around for the next few weeks because I've got lots of different ideas going on here. So these are just some artificial flowers that I got from Dollar Tree, and I've done this technique before. It works beautifully. I'm just pressing them into this titanium white to take an impression, and they work really well for what I have in mind here. So that little top row there, I'm using a sheet of sheet music to pull off, but didn't really like the way that worked. So I'm just using some regular old tissue paper to pull the rest of the print. Now you're going to be able to see it subtly, but when I lay it down on the collage, it works really, really nicely with the black and white and the patterns that I already have going on in the background. So I love pulling prints on tissue paper. I say this in every video because the tissue paper kind of just disappears into the background and becomes part of the surface while the print is left on top. So you can get some really interesting tonal qualities by doing that, and I just really like the way that it looks. So here I pressed the flowers directly into paint and then rolled some of the paint onto them, and I'm picking it up with a black acrylic paint background on some more tissue paper, and you can see here the white flowers against the black background that I got. It's just another interesting kind of quality that I'm going to use to give a little bit of variety to this piece. Now that I've given the background enough time to dry, I decided I wanted a little bit of warmth to it, so I'm adding a little bit of Naples yellow there and just kind of blending it over several of the areas. I'm not worrying too much about exactly where it goes because most of this is going to be covered up anyway. What I'm doing here is just creating different areas of warmth and cool in colors. And when I lay those collage papers on top, it's going to obscure a lot of that anyway, but just the feel of the tone and the warmth of the colors are going to come through. So off camera, I made several different sheets of the flowers. I didn't want to bore you by pulling, a whole bunch of different prints there, but I do have, I'll link this for you. I do have my short video from last week is one of the prints that I pulled, and it's interesting. I laid down my polka dot texture first and then printed the flowers on top of it and pulled it, and you'll see here in a minute it looks pretty cool. So now I'm just kind of deciding as I go where I want these to lay. So I had the loose idea in my head that I wanted a floral and I wanted it to be pretty neutral, but I'm an intuitive artist, so that means I make a lot of my decisions as I go. Here's that sheet that has the polka dot flowers on it, and this was a very pale pull, but then I have the rest of it, which ended up being the ghost print that was darker than the original, which doesn't usually happen that way, but I'll be using that in here too. But anyway, so what I'm doing is pulling up a flower and just seeing where it feels right in the moment. So it's a lot of positioning and repositioning. And that's the great thing about doing collage, because you can, until you glue it down, you can make as many decisions as you want and decide which ones work for you and what feels right with the piece. And if you don't like it, no harm done. You can just move it around again until you're happy with the piece. So that's the white flower printed on the black, or pulled with the black acrylic ink there. And I love the contrast. You can see there with the white and the gray flowers. They're so pale and delicate and fragile, but that is much more, it has much more visual force to it because it has that black background. And that's what I'm going for here, is just a variety of tones and a variety of contrasts there to really work with each other and create a nice focal point for the piece. So I thought that the Naples yellow was maybe a bit too yellow, which I know sounds silly, but I put just a bit of the Titan buff on there to tone it down a bit. And then I added some more of the Mars black and sprayed it and got those nice drips on there, which I really like. And that's just creating another visual texture. And what it also did was put some paint on top of the flowers, so it didn't look like everything was just plopped right there on top of the board. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's the way you want it to look, but for this piece, that's not really where I was going. So that little piece of collage paper that I put down there is something that I made in a previous video. I just thought it needed maybe something a little bit different. I do end up covering up basically all of it with the flowers, but some of it does poke through since I am using the tissue paper, and that's enough for me. I kind of like that there's just a little bit of texture there that's not just the flower texture, and I thought it worked pretty well. So I'm just gluing down some more flowers there. I'm cleaning up some paint that got a little muddy when I didn't let it dry completely when I went to lay down my matte medium, so it got a little muddy, but I actually don't really mind that because it's adding another tone there. And now I'm going in with a sharp palette knife and also an old gift card and using it to pull away some of the pieces there. I will do that right on the board so that I can control exactly what I want where. I will cut out the pieces sometimes just to get a basic shape, but then I go in and refine it right there on the board. All right, so at this point, I'm not sure how many other flowers that I want to put on there or where they're going to go, but I do know that I'm going to want some red ones. So that was going to be my main focal point, were these really brilliant pops of red colored flowers. So I'm going in now to print those. I'm just using my little gel plate there and much smaller flowers. Those are also artificials that I got at the Dollar Tree. And my first plan was to just set out some Grumbacher red paint, which is one of my favorite reds, and just use a brush and paint them in. But when I started doing that, and I'm going to show you here in a minute, I'm going to flip the gel plate over and you can see too many of the brush strokes, and I wasn't pleased with that. I'm going to show you that right now. It just wasn't the look that I was going for. I wanted something much more solid, so I decided, okay, I'm just going to put the paint on, the Grumbacher red on, roll it on, and I'll use it as my pool color and pull the whole thing up with that, because it doesn't matter if it's around the black, you're not going to see it anyway, and those flowers are all going to be cut out, so you're really going to just get that detail there, which is what I wanted. Look how beautifully detailed those are. Just gel printing is just amazing to me sometimes. Okay, there's another one of those polka dot flowers that I was talking about that I made in my short video, and I think those just look so neat. Again, it's just another dimension, another way to add a little bit of texture. You're still doing the floral, so everything goes together visually, but it's just a little bit more interest, and I purposely left a good chunk of that on top there. A, because I wanted that texture, but also the darkness gives it a little bit of visual weight that I thought really that corner could benefit from. So I have another one there, just a half piece, and I'm finding a spot to put it. This is where I end up covering up that other little collage paper that I put on there, but I really like the way that flower worked in the corner, and again, it was just a little bit dark, so I liked the way that that added that visual weight up there as well. And you might have noticed I put a little tiny dark slip of paper underneath it before I laid it down, and that's because the center of the flower didn't go up that far, and I wanted that darkness in the corner also. So there's a lot of cutting and tearing out of flowers coming up here, and I edited a lot of that out for you, but sometimes I use scissors and sometimes I use my hands. If you want to just use your fingers to tear, absolutely nothing wrong with that, and I love the quality of that. It gives like the nice frayed edges. Just make sure your fingers of both hands are very, very close together, and that way you can get pretty precise tears without accidentally ripping the whole piece apart. Those white ones I just love, and this is definitely a technique that I'm going to use again. I'm seeing this on a much larger scale, like something that's at least, I don't know, maybe like a 16 by 20, just filled with all of these flowers. And I can't decide if I want to do colors or if I want to do black and white. I'm really loving the black and white and the way they look, but I don't know. This is something I'll decide, and hopefully at some point we will work on that together. But when you just start layering them, and because they are already such different tones and we have some of those background tones, it's creating even more. So it's like exponential, the amount of tones that come from just using these simple papers that I'm making there. And this is that one that we did that was the white paint on the black background, and I think that turned out really nice too. And I think that it needed just a little more darkness down there in the bottom, which is what ended up being the bottom of the piece. And you can see there, I have a little pen with a nib on it that I keep handy. When you've got these tissue papers especially, but any collage paper can tear, but once they get wet from the medium on them, they tear so easily, and I use a card to spread over them to flatten them down and remove any excess medium, and it's very, very easy to accidentally rip a little bit. So I just keep one of those pens handy, and it's a great tool to just go in and very carefully lift up the torn piece and bring it back to where you want it. Okay, so now we're working on the red flowers, and I'm cutting out the first one with you here, but then I just went ahead and cut out the rest of them off camera because it gets pretty tedious watching somebody cut paper. So I didn't want to put you all through that. So this next bit, I was just positioning these little flowers everywhere, trying to decide the design that I wanted best. And I ultimately ended up sleeping on it because sometimes when I get too close to a project, I like to take some time away from it, maybe a few hours, maybe overnight, and then often the answer will just be screaming at me when I come back to it, and that was kind of the case today. There were a lot of interesting configurations here, and I even thought about making some more of these little red flowers, but ultimately the design that I ended up going with, which is right here, really worked for the end piece, and I'll show you why in a minute. So I am now just one by one gluing these little guys down with my matte gel medium, and you'll notice that I put some medium down on the surface, put down the collage paper, and then put more medium on top of it, and that is just to make sure that it sticks down really good there. And then I use my little card to smooth it over and take away, well, that does two things. It takes away any excess medium that I don't want laying on the surface, but it also flattens everything out and makes sure there are no air bubbles. If you have air bubbles or pockets in this, it can be a weak point of the piece, and it could cause a tear in the future if somebody would bump up against it, or just in transport or anything. So you want to try really hard not to have any of those on there. Okay, next up I am collaging some words on here, and I am using my Ransom note style lettering. I didn't go through that process on this video, but I will put a link to the video where I do demonstrate this. This is a technique that I use a lot because I just love the quality of this. I love the way it looks, and it's really easy to achieve with the gel plate. And I say easy because it's a really easy concept. It is sometimes very frustrating to get it to work out, but check out that video and you'll see all of the ins and outs of it. So I'm getting those letters smoothed down, and I chose the words "the end" on there. And once those dried, I wanted them to be a little bit darker. I didn't want to go over and just trace every single thing because it kind of would lose the quality of that printed quality that makes sense to print it and not just write it on there. But I thought it needed just a little bit darkening to be more of a focal point. And then once I did that, I thought that the white flowers could have used a little bit of definition as well, and I'm really glad that I did that because I didn't go in and outline every single tiny thing, But I went over it enough to give the leaves some definition, and I put in just a little bit of darkness where the low points and shadows would be. And I think it just made them pop a little bit and stand out just a bit better against all of the other darkness that's going on. They kind of got lost in the background because it was such a light pale yellow background, but when those lines go in, it really makes those pop a little bit. Fine line work is another technique that you will see in a lot of my work, and I've always been drawn to it. I love the quality of the fine line, and sometimes I'll think, okay, I want to use something thicker like a Posca pen, which is an acrylic paint marker, and every time I reach for it to do this kind of thing, I'm disappointed with the result because there is just something about the fine line that you just can't get with anything else. It's that quality really speaks to me in a way, and you'll see it in a lot of my older work. I mean, and I'm talking like decades past, and I use it still in a lot of these mixed media collage pieces today. I made one more judgment call on these letters because they just still weren't doing it for me. I really wanted them to stand out a little bit more, so I did end up going in and darkening them all just a little bit, but I don't think I lost the quality there that I was going for with the printed letters. One final thing I did was take a little bit of pastel and go in and just warm up that yellow a tiny bit. This is a very pale pink that I'm using, and I don't have an exact color because this is an ancient set of pastels. Seriously, I've had these for probably 30 years, if not longer. And I'm going in just with a very, very pale blushy color pink, and then just a little bit more of a brighter pink. I just wanted that warmed up a tiny little bit, and I think it really brought that midsection to life. I thought about going in and doing some line work like I've done on my other pieces, but I don't think it needed it. I think it just needed to be warmed up a tiny bit with those pastels. Now this is an oil pastel, a black oil pastel, and I'm going around the very edge and blending that black in so that it just comes up over the surface of the board. And why I'm doing that is because it creates this like burnished leather look, which I really like, and I think it finished the piece in the perfect way. Sometimes I will use painter's tape and paint off around the edges and have like a hard black line, and I think that really works for some of the pieces, but for this one and the quality of everything that was in it, I think this worked much better, and I'm really happy with the way that this worked out. This is something I've been meaning to try, but I haven't tried with any of my pieces yet, and I could not be happier with the outcome. And here's the finished piece for you. Thank you all so much for joining me on this journey, and I appreciate each and every one of you that has subscribed. It has been a massive amount of subscribers in the last couple of weeks. Thank you guys so much. If you haven't had a chance yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you like what you saw here, give me a thumbs up, and please feel free to ask me any questions, or if you have any comments at all. I try to respond to all comments. If I have missed a comment, sometimes I don't get notifications for comments on other people's comments, so I do apologize if that happened. But thank you all so much. If you're interested in this piece, it will be available on my Etsy shop along with a lot of my other pieces that you've seen me make, and I hope to see you again next week. Have a great one.